Hello, and today I'm going to be interviewing someone who has offered to talk to me about their experience with the Grateful Dead. And so I'm meeting with Harley today. And so, yeah, I guess the most logical thing is just to start at the beginning, like when about, I don't know, maybe how you got into the Dead. And I'm sure there's a ton of stories that will just naturally kind of progress. So,
Yeah, and they're all pretty weird, and I don't honestly know what happened first. But I kind of hated them, honestly, growing up. My friends would try to turn me on in high school and stuff because I was into psychedelics and consciousness and Terrence McKenna and all this kind of stuff. So they knew it should be something I would connect with. But I was into Bone Thugs and Harmony and Megadeth and all that kind of stuff, and I was like, I don't know what this hippie crap is, and I don't want anything to do with it. And so I really regret that because people offered me free tickets to like the last show in '95 in DC, and I was like, no thanks. Um, so one day I was at work at Ruby Tuesdays. I think it was like 20 years old or something, like a corporate restaurant in Virginia. And I just had this overwhelming impulse that I needed to go to the record store and buy. I knew it had to be live, some Grateful Dead performance. And I actually went to my boss and told him that I needed to leave and he needed to watch my tables. And it was a really weird impulse. And I went and bought Dozen at the Nick, the 1990 New York show. And I didn't really like it. So instead of just thinking, well, that was a weird impulse that went nowhere, I went and bought another one. And on my, 1999 or 2000 waiter's salary, spending 60 or $80 on Grateful Dead, concert box sets or whatever was really weird if I didn't like the first one. I didn't like that one either. So eventually I just happened to drop some mind altering something, and somebody had put on one of the CDs, and I walked by the stereo, and it just kind of clicked that there was something really extraordinary happening with the music, and from that moment on, it's like I was just determined to take music further. I was a guitarist. I had been since I was like 9 or 10 years old, and I'd always kind of known that it could be deeper and go further. And that moment kind of confirmed and showed me kind of a way forward. And then so the other ones were performing, which was like Bob Weir and I think Billy and Mickey or something. It wasn't all of them, and Jerry was already long dead. So I decided to go, and I ate some mushrooms, and I went down into really close. In fact, some hippie kids came up and saw me sitting in the field, and they're like, "Hey, do you want these front row tickets?" And I was really suspicious because I was like from the inner city and grew up in a really bad neighborhood and stuff, and not really used to people being so friendly. And I was really suspicious, kind of looking at them like, "What is the trap?" And so they gave us the tickets, and we went like right up to the front of the stage, and I remember having this feeling of like white light just like emanating from the band, and this feeling of being part of a unified collective consciousness. And I had the thought of all of the preposterous places to find something so magical and powerful, washed up members of the Grateful Dead. And the second I had that thought, they sang, "Sometimes you get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right." And that really freaked me out because I had never heard that song before. There was no way that I could have anticipated, you know what I mean? It's not like there could have been a subconscious connection where I knew that was coming and had that thought, there was just no way to explain it. So I had to leave because it was too intense. And I went back to where I was sitting before. And I thought, this has got to be in my head. There's no way the music is like doing what it feels and hear and what you know what I mean? This is just too surreal. And I looked around and I saw that so many of the 80,000 people or whatever had the same look on their faces that I did, that I thought, no, this is all of us. And when I thought that, they saying, "Can't look at you without looking at me. We're guilty of the same old thing, talking more and more about less and less and forgetting the love we bring." And I'm like, okay, this is just too weird. So I walk up to the top of the bowl. The stadium was kind of at the stage was on the bottom of this big bowl. And there was one other guy walking around the rim. And I had told my brother's like Marilyn Manson fan, gothy friend that he should go to this show. And I see this other guy, only other person walking around the rim, and right in the dead center, it's my brother's friend. And he goes, dude, what is happening down there? I had to get away from it. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm doing up here. So the kind of phenomena that I just described is like normal fare for the Grateful Dead scene. And connecting with that was like something that I had been looking for. I suspected that there was a deeper layer to reality. And it's like the music and the kind of collective mind phenomena that emerged at these concerts, and I think still does probably, was like the confirmation that I needed. So basically, at that moment, I committed to trying to go to California and play either with the surviving members or people associated with the inner circle. And I told my mom that's what I was doing. And it took me 10 years, but I went out to California and more or less did that.
So what year was this? Like, can we just go over? So when was this
2000?
concert? Okay, so in 1990 was this crazy concert? Like,
No. 2000.
okay, the one that you just described was 2000.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when you had the collective consciousness and it was too powerful to be close to the stage, that you had to go to the back because it was too much intensity that close.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. I
that's what it
guess.
sounds
I mean,
like.
yeah, something like
Something
that.
like that. Like, it's hard to, I mean, yeah, even just hearing you tell the story. I mean, the part that you had that thought and then they played the song that you didn't even know yet, but then described exactly what you just thought. And then you had another thought and then they described, and then you looked around at the people and that described that thought. I mean, that's really cool. Okay, so then now it's 2010 when you made it to California to...
No, 2011. There's one other element of this though that I should probably share because it's maybe even crazier. And I'm not sure which thing happened first. I'm pretty sure the other ones happened first. And then this festival happened. It could have been the other way around. I don't really recall, but I still didn't really know anything about this band. Yeah, actually, you know what? The festival was first because I didn't know any of the music yet. So there was this festival in Spotsylvania, Virginia called the All Good Festival. And I don't even know why I went because I didn't like bluegrass and it's a very redneck place. So they advertised it as a bluegrass festival so that the cops wouldn't harass people, I think. And when I started to arrive, I noticed there was just miles and miles of hippie buses, and I was like, "This is weird for a bluegrass festival." And then we get there, and there's like 20,000 people, and it's like something is not right about this. So my brother and I are like, headbanger kids. He was more like goth. We did not fit in, and we're going to go set our tent up. And randomly, as we're walking to the tent, this old man says, the Grateful Dead used to make it rain when they played Looks Like Rain. And we're like, whatever, old timer, go eat some more acid. So we go set our tent up and we go down to see the show. And I remember this old man saying this. And I look up and the sky's clear. And I'm like, man, that was stupid. And we didn't know any of the music, so we didn't know that it was Looks Like Rain when they went into it. And if you bear in mind that Dark Star Orchestra recreates Grateful Dead concerts and they never played the same show twice, the chances of them playing an obscure-ish song like Looks Like Rain is like really low. And so I hear him sing It Feels Like Rain, and we feel raindrops hit our faces. And my brother and I look at each other like, no way, this is not, can't be real. And as the song gets more and more intense, the storm builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And at the climax of it, um, lightning shoots like horizontally over the crowd. And I actually found out later from Dark Star Orchestra, right when I was about to go on stage with him, that lightning bolt actually hit a transformer on the stage. And I thought that the rain just came down so hard that they had to stop playing, but it turns out the stage actually got blown up, I guess. And the sky just cracked open after this lightning bolt. And when the lightning bolt first hit, the first thing I thought was like that wasn't real. And as soon as I had that thought, this woman behind me leans in my ear and she goes, "That was really close." And I was like, I mean, my hair stood up. I mean, the lightning was just right over top of us.
Where was this? What
And
city? What state?
Spotsylvania, Virginia, 2001, I guess. So, the other one show could have been 2001 too. I really don't recall the specifics of all this. I know these two incidents were very close together though. And so the sky cracks open, it's dumping, and 20,000 people, because we were all in our 20s and we had heard these stories from old deadheads, like the weather would respond and especially looks like rain. And then we see this cover band, and that happens, and so no one said a word. There was no cheering, just 20,000 people, total silence, pouring rain, turn around and walk back to their tents. Like nobody said anything.
Okay, so
So,
that did knock out all of the sound and power and whatever. The
oh, it
stage
was,
was
yeah.
destroyed. Like the transformer was in charge of the stage electricity, basically.
Yep.
Okay.
And I didn't know that until 2012, I guess. I was in the Catskills with Dark Star Orchestra, and Donna Jean Godchow, who sang in the Grateful Dead in the 70s, was at this event, and we got to see her redemption that night too, which was wild. But I'd seen Dark Star Orchestra over the years like 5 or 6 times at this point, and every time they didn't play Dark Star, and I thought it's weird they call themselves that. I wonder when I'll finally see them play it. And as I was about to go to sit in with them, I was talking to Rob Eaton, who's the rhythm guitarist, and we talked about All Good. I was like, "Do you remember the fucking looks like rain and the lightning bolt?" And he's like, "Yeah, that lightning bolt hit the stage and blew up a transformer." So that's how I found that out. I was actually like talking to them. And if you had told me back then that this would happen, my head would have exploded. And so not only that, but I said, "Okay, well, Rob, what are we going to play? Scarlet Fire or something?" And he goes, "How about Dark Star?" So all these 6 times I'd seen them and wondered, when am I ever going to see them play this? I would be on stage the first time with Donna in the audience. It's just
Kind of
really,
a lot of coincidences, you know?
yeah, well, I'm at this point, I don't really believe in
That's what I
coincidences.
mean. Like it's like too many coincidences were
Yeah.
happening. So for it to be coincidence is my point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know
And
what you mean.
part of the reason I'm sharing all that is that, this energy that they are exchanging, I think is probably the best way to put it. The deeper you are in that, the more this kind of stuff happens, and that's kind of the value of it. I call it like gnosis induction, that there are certain musicians that are sort of tuned in to a layer of reality that is subtle, but very profound, and enough exposure to it is almost like walking onto the set of Stranger Things, except it's real life. And that, in my opinion, that's kind of what the Grateful Dead, and there are other bands too, but particularly the Grateful Dead, have kind of been doing for people all these years, is sort of exposing them to a more subtle and fundamental layer of reality that does a lot of things to enhance our lives.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know what you're talking about. Like this, it's hard to explain in words. Actually, like it's a really hard thing to put into language. But yeah, this feeling of collective consciousness, this feeling of deeper consciousness. I don't know how to describe it, but I think if this band has been able to do this for a lot of people, it's a beautiful thing. And so you think it's not unique to the Grateful Dead, but most of the Grateful Dead songs do this? Or do you think it's like certain of their compositions or the people? Like, what do you think is the magic there?
Um, it's not just a feeling. I think I can tell you that it's something deeper and realer than that. And recently, a lot of things have been uncovered, I think, in scientific research that kind of give us a mechanistic basis that could underlie this kind of phenomena. Uh, Bioelectric field based, or I guess, electromagnetic field based cognition, even non-neural cognition in plants and stuff. And you know what I mean? The idea that there could be some sort of universal mind or some sort of connectivity in our subconscious, a collective mind, is not really incongruent with science even anymore. If you take the Grateful Dead's word at face value, and this is something I actually eventually got to talk to Phil Lesh about. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, and asked him, Phil, the telepathy thing is not just marketing, right? And I mean, I knew the answer already, but I wanted to hear it from him while I had his attention. And he said it absolutely is not. And you have to be listening in a way that is like, I don't remember his exact words, but beyond just your ears. Like you have to be listening with your whole soul. And they would actually talk about how at sufficient doses of psychedelics, you could sort of bring down the reducing valve in your consciousness so that your the vantage point of an individual, how did Terence McKenna say it? The absurdly narrow vantage point of a singular perspective or whatever is temporarily dissolved. And they would claim that they could inhabit each other's bodies and play each other's instruments, and that they would even do this to audience members who would report things like, I felt like Jerry was in my body, and people are like, you got way too high last night, man. And then Jerry said in an interview in like 1985, yeah, we used to go out and sometimes inhabit people's bodies in the audience. And, so, I mean, I guess it depends on how seriously you want to take the dead, but that's basically what they were saying, that psychedelics allow us to sort of suspend the filter in the nervous system and give us access to a sort of unified consciousness that we're all really a part of, and sort of experiencing the illusion of separateness for, I guess, how do you say, like, evolutionary purposes, so that we can survive, so that we can have an experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any particular like favorite Grateful Dead songs? Like, or are there some that you could like explain meaning that maybe most people wouldn't understand? Like, is there like a song and you could be like, oh well, the people think it's about this, but it's actually about this? Because I think that would be interesting since you have such insight into this level. You know what I mean? You have like a deeper. I can tell you're very connected with a deeper level. So, because most people are very surface level.
There's a lot of that, actually. There are certain traditions that are a big influence on the dead, but it's a difficult thing to talk about. But I'll give you one example that's pretty wild. And I don't have proof of this, but I study a lot of different traditions, like the Hermetic tradition and Babylonian and Syrian kind of mythologies, and there are sort of archetypal myths that sort of underlie all of these variations. Like a sort of, I call it the invisible thread. Um, and so the original Lucifer myth, for example, is that he was a musician with a harp in his chest that had no strings on it, that played directly into the mind of God, and that it wasn't really an angel either. It's sort of like an allegory for like an electromagnetic wave, basically, and the fall of um, the light bearer, the wave, is actually just the sort of the descent of energy into matter, and that stars are also beings, and they emanate a consciousness that's sort of projected onto planets. And it's a long story, but that's enough to understand where I'm going. Oh, and we all also are this light, right? So the sun's consciousness is our consciousness. If my words did glow with the gold of sunshine, and my tunes were played on a harp unstrung, would you hear my voice come through the music? Would you hold it near as it were your own? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff where if you know these old myths and whatnot, that I'm not sure actually even are myths, uh, if you understand what's behind the allegory.
Right, because
You know
there's
what I
so
mean? The
many.
surface,
Right. I know
the
what you're
surface level
saying.
is myth. Hmm.
Right, right. It's like how they told the story. Well, they had to put the stories in their words of the time because people didn't
Right,
understand things, right? But then
right.
I agree that if you look at enough ancient traditions and go to the most ancient texts they have, the most, cuneiform and all these ancient languages, and there's always these stories that seem kind of universal, even if these cultures were many miles apart. So I know what you mean. Like there seems to be certain things that there was wisdom that people knew that was then interpreted into like this silly story that then people took literally maybe with like the way they described it in the time. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, those are really good lyrics. Okay, so then I mean those. I mean, like I'm like that's good. What song is that from?
Ripple.
Oh yeah, that's Ripple because I just covered that one. That's right. I was like that sounds so familiar. I was like I feel
Yeah,
like I just sang that. I was like that sounds like I know it. He's like oh yes, I did sing it once. But no one would think it's well. Also, the name Ripple makes you think of like water, kind of going, right?
Ripple
Like,
in still water when there is no pebble to toss nor wind to blow. That's the universe.
yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, but it's like, even just because, yeah, ripples, usually there has to be an impetus and then it keeps going. But what if it kept going without any, yeah.
Hmm.
And the fact that ripples can start so little, or when you skip right, and it, like, it keeps going and emanating out energy. Yeah, it's a really cool, I don't know, I guess some people would call that a metaphor, but you're also
I'll give
saying it
you.
could be literal. So,
It is. It's both.
yeah.
All that is allegory, or all that is metaphor. That's definitely a thing that has been said, and it's probably pretty spot on. But I'll give you another one that's a little bit more down to earth, and I'm certain of this interpretation. Roll away the dew, right? The line that ring bells, it could have one good ring, baby, you can't tell. I don't remember what the first line is, but the doing process is when you make a bell, the doing process is how you harden it. And the Liberty Bell was, they skimped on the doing process and did it the cheapest way possible. And the first time they rang it, it cracked. So roll away the dew and the Freedom Bell. Look at the United States right now, and they skimped on it, which is so capitalist, and they rang it once and it broke.
Mm.
So there's all kinds of stuff like that. Like a lot of people think Grateful Dead lyrics are just nonsense, but you have to know a ton of stuff in order to put it in perspective. Really, Finnegan's Wake. Are you familiar with this book by James Joyce? It's written in like portmanteau and polyglot words, which uh, Joyce spoke not fluently, but he could read and write 72 languages,
Wow.
including like Quechua, which is what they speak where I live in Peru. All sorts of obscure languages, even try indigenous languages and stuff. And so the book is basically like a hologram that begins and ends in the middle of the same sentence, so it makes a complete circle.
Wow.
And it's sort of built in this Kabbalistic framework, and it's completely insane. And there's all sorts of historical references and whatnot kind of coded into it, and Masonic secrets and stuff. And so you can take any syllable and say it's like san. It means something in Japanese, Latin, and say Greek and Quechua.
Mm-hmm.
You can take every single syllable and interpret it in one of those languages, and then you can extract all these other paragraphs and shit from a single word. Garcia,
Ah.
Garcia and Hunter used to sit around and like riff on this book in the car they lived in as 15-year-olds. Scholars
What?
scholars like Joseph Campbell from Harvard sit around with skeleton keys and they spend their entire life in their spare time trying to chew through this book, and these two 15-year-olds were just like in a car chewing through it.
That's so
And
cool. So they're really smart and brilliant, basically, like
they
genius beyond belief. Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm just trying to lend some perspective on like how difficult it is to really understand Grateful Dead lyrics, because Hunter only ever explained Roll Away the Dew. He refused to talk about anything else. But once you understand that, you realize how much stuff is encoded in there.
right? No, no. I mean, just you telling me that there's a book that each word in every single language is coded into that syllable. That makes so much sense to me. Like san, it means something in this language, it means that, and da-da. And then you read it with all that perspective and can translate it into anything. And then you're telling me these 15-year-old kids were able to just like, hey, let's just read a sentence from that, and then from that they could extract all the meanings of, they could take dictionaries and like look up all the other meanings of every single syllable. So then,
Yeah, but then you also have to know all the historical references and the geographical stuff, and I mean it's not easy.
right.
And
That's
then the other
why, I mean, that's also why I think when I started listening to the Grateful Dead and people were like, you're not getting Hunter's lyrics at all, or you're wrong, or you don't get it. I'm like, yes, I don't get it. And that's why I'm asking for help and I'm interviewing people like you, because you understand how complex it is. So the average person can't possibly just hop on the bus and then like get it in like a day. It takes a really long time because it's so deep.
Yeah, and our patience was getting pretty thin. People telling us we were idiots for thinking that there was, I mean, Deadhead's got it bad for decades because people thought we were all just high and imagining things or something. So it's kind of nice right now to see everybody kind of noticing that that isn't necessarily true.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it seems also that it's more mainstream now. I mean, I guess like because you're a younger person in the scheme of Deadheads, right? Then I just interviewed like the older Gen X, but then soon I'm going to interview some boomers who are like the 70s Grateful Dead people. And so I think seeing all the different times when people hopped on the bus, as they say, right? Like, I think it's interesting to just compare all the stories of what brought people into the Dead and what their background was. Because, again, even just going back to your idea of like collective consciousness, it really takes the village, right? Like, the whole idea is like, everybody matters, everybody is a piece of it, right? So it's like, that's also cool that like people can be part of this thing and every single one is a piece of a huge puzzle, I guess. Like some big jigsaw puzzle that's not put together. I mean, at least it's hard for us to see it.
Like The Wake, the book that we were talking about. And one of the things about that book that makes it so relevant to this discussion too is that James Joyce really couldn't have done that consciously. There's no way I mean, it took him 18 years to piece it together, but he was blackout drunk the whole time. And so the book itself is kind of a testament to like the universal mind, you know, like something did this through this guy. He didn't sit there and think, okay, I know how to piece together this. It's just, it doesn't make any sense. It's beyond the capacity of a human being to do this consciously, you know, at least
you have to
in
learn
my
to
opinion.
tap in, right? You have to tap into that place, that creativity place. I understand a bit. Like someone said, because I described in one video this feeling of when I'm performing or when I'm teaching, singing, and then I kind of get into this like stream of consciousness that it just doesn't seem like it just happens and I can't, and they're like, oh, that's a flow state. I was like, oh, cool. So I've been in a flow state and I know what that feels like. So I think for some people with creativity, I think all creativity in a way, if you think about it, if there really is this collective mind, because sometimes when I'm coming up with lyrics, I'm thinking and then I'm writing and then I'm like, wait, and then it like pops in your head somehow and you're like, where did that come from? Like it's like muses, right? If you think about the ancient tradition of muses, right? This idea that there's these women who inspire people, right? That have the art. They're all inspiration of art. But that is just an easier way to explain this phenomenon where when you're coming up with something new or you're writing, you know, you're a guitarist, it sounds like. So when you're writing a new melody, you're writing a new riff, you're writing a new chord progression, and then all of a sudden you're like, where did that come from? You know? Right? Is that kind of what you're saying? Like, so I'm not as like, obviously I'm not as like tapped in as as you and like other people. So I'm just trying to put it in my simple California girl words. So
I'm from California too, actually, sort of. I mean, the second half of my life, that's where I live.
well, now you're living in the universe because your backdrop is, you know, stars and planet and like, you know, it definitely seems like and you're in Peru apparently. So that's really cool.
But the thing that you were talking about with the universal mind, the way that I think about it is that there is a reducing valve in the nervous system, and psychedelics of different types bring down different sort of bandwidths of it to different degrees. And that's really how this access to the collective mind during these collective improvisations, at least it doesn't have to happen that way, but it makes it a lot easier. And one of the other reasons that I'm so confident that it is a real phenomena is that when I realized this, because at that concert, the first one I told you about, I realized that they weren't singing about their message, but it was really obvious that everyone heard them. You know, it's not in the lyrics very much, except like Ripple and maybe one or two other songs. You know, and the majority of the catalog is about like gambling.
Well, yeah, I just learned about U.S. blues, which apparently is just personifying Uncle Sam and talking about America being grifters. I was like, okay. Like, I was like, interesting, you know? Like, everyone's like, yeah, so I know what you're saying. Like, a lot of the songs are just, like, bluesy, you know?
Yeah, they're not Peggy-O or whatever, you know? They're romance ballads, and they're not up there saying, like, you know, you guys are all one mind and whatever. They didn't have to say a word, and people still understood. And so I thought, okay, well, I want to do that. And I figured out that it's entrainment. And this is something that's been proven since they've had meditators sit in a room and measure their brain waves, and they will chase the highest cycle. And so I knew that had something to do with it, that somehow we entered into this like collective mind, and the brain waves are chasing whichever one's cycling the fastest because that sound train works. And I played a few shows in California, and 3 times in 1 week, people that weren't familiar with this style of music, one of them was like a punk rock type, didn't take psychedelics even or anything, and they were coming up to us and saying, "Hey, can I tell you what I learned about music from listening to you guys tonight?" So whoever's cycling the highest and the group mind forms, and when you're improvising and everyone chases that high, and I was like, holy shit, because I'm not singing about this. This is my exact intention, and I'm getting this feedback from the audience that they're understanding what I understood out in that other one's audience 10 years earlier, So there, and I think it's really important for us to understand as, I don't know, modern people or whatever, that a lot of what we have dismissed as woo, it is true that nothing happens without some sort of mechanism in this world. There is such thing as magic if it has a mechanism to act on, So this kind of phenomenon that I'm describing, we're kind of at the point where we even understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's borderline measurable, even
Right.
at this point.
I know what you're saying. It's like, it was like, there used to be that science thought they were disproving religion, right? Like, it's like, oh, we know better, we have science, right? But then they started going into little particles, and I live near the Stanford Linear Accelerator, and they're just breaking apart atoms and all sorts of crazy stuff like that, right? So then when they get into the little nitty gritty, it's like, wait a minute, there is some kind of magnetic force, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like there is a glue that is more than we can explain with just, this is the moon, and this is the earth, and this is a gravitational field, and this is the soul. It's like, you need something a little more. I see what you're saying. It's like, it goes full circle,
Mm-hmm.
though. But everyone then dismissed a lot of the atheist type people, like, oh, I don't believe in anything. It's like, well, there's something.
Well,
You
the
know?
pendulum swings to extremes. If it swings to one extreme, equal and opposite reaction, because these laws govern everything, including non-physical processes. You know what I mean? So if something swings too far this way, even if it's just in the realm of idea, it's still going to swing too far in the other direction. And so that's kind of what's been happening. Religion was dumb and insane,
Mm-hmm.
but abject materialism is also dumb and insane. And there's a
Right.
middle ground. There's a middle ground that I think is super obvious once you have managed to sort of dissolve the mind-forged manacles of cultural conditioning.
Right. And also what you were talking about, how the separation created in order to have like evolution or whatever, like people continuing on in life, right? But then there's so much people who just kind of live in a tribalistic day-to-day life even today, and they're just kind of dealing with like, get food, get water, get housing, survive. And those type of people, it's going to be really hard for them to be like, I can reach a deeper consciousness, because like they're just trying to survive in the physical world. So it seems like a bit of a
Oh,
luxury for people who can like get to that point of like deeper understanding.
yeah, and I honestly can't help but think that it's kind of deliberate on the part of the overlords to sort of engineer those circumstances where it's it's been a long held belief that people that really have a more holistic understanding of the world around them are sovereign, and they don't need to be ruled and can't be and won't tolerate it. So making sure that the masses don't connect with this kind of knowledge, really important for the overlords. And so because it's becoming so clear and obvious, they're sort of increasing the pressures to just focus on survival.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always thought that TV, like primetime TV, I always called it an opiate for the masses,
Hmm.
because they put it on at night. They want everyone just to kind of be stuck at home and watching their football game or watching whatever, their sitcom that comes on every night. And it kind of just keeps people from really feeling, from really, because like feeling it, you have to like be in touch with yourself. You have to like look inward. You have to face your emotions. Also, it then prevents you from creativity. Because I think if you just start consuming, you don't get into the creative, and it takes time to step back, and to be creative you have to kind of let that, you have to like, you have to work on it. You can't, if you're just like consuming media all the time, you're not going to be creative because you're just consuming. I don't know, that's how
You
I
have
sense.
you have to have a sense of purpose to create anything of substance.
Yes.
And so that's another reason why, if your compass is not set, then someone's going to set it for you. And that's got a lot to do also, I think, with what you're describing, is that this sort of crisis of purpose that we are experiencing is also kind of engineered in order to keep people sort of focused on consumerism. Another thing to consider is that the researchers that were commissioned by the United States government in the 1960s to look at psychedelics did not say these are dangerous and you need to make them illegal. That's not what happened. They said, I think it wasn't Stanislav Grof, or was it? Um, Not Michael Hollingshead, I don't know, one of these guys, you can look it up, said these compounds can be used to treat any psychological aberration known to psychiatry or psychology, and it is simply unprecedented in the history of psychiatry that a medication can be this efficacious and oftentimes in a single dose or something along those lines. And the government was like, oh, really? Shut that shit down now. Because,
Keep the people sick.
yeah,
Keep the
well,
people depressed.
and keep them, yeah, exactly, and keep them medicatable, because big pharma, I think, was like, no, 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 and we're not just fixing people with a single dose of psilocybin. And then if you factor in if that's true, right, and we know it's true now because the research is as tall as Everest, in terms of like addiction treatment and PTSD and anxiety and alcoholism and all these things that have caused how many car accidents, murders, all of this, how much less of that would have happened if they had been honest about psychedelics from the beginning. So the evidence that they are aware of what more holistic consciousness, the consequences of that, and the tools that we have to catalyze it and all that, and that they deliberately suppressed it, is pretty overwhelming at this point.
It is. I mean, and now at least we're seeing therapeutic, like therapy, like what is it, like ketamine, or like now you can go see a therapist under certain things, and then it's like work through trauma, and it's now a process which wouldn't have existed during this whole period of complete illegality, whatever. I don't know the word illegal. I don't know.
Yeah, I just did an interview with Rachel Turetsky and Douglas Wingate, who are both PhD. She's a psychologist, and he works with Chinese medicine, and they're both psychedelic therapists. And they wrote a book called Eighth Circuit Ascension, which kind of goes through Timothy Leary's model of the eight circuits of human consciousness and how that corresponds to our development from like the perinatal stages up through Buddhahood, if that's what's on the table for us. So yeah, that's all really tremendously helpful. And it's another reason that they didn't like psychedelics, because if you have the drive and reasonably high intelligence and you understand enough about self-analysis and you use psychedelics in the right context, you can pretty much take care of your own mental health. And yeah, that's
Yeah, you don't think that the
problematic.
government had to shut it down. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I could see that. I mean, especially what's interesting is that because now there's these therapists who are using psychedelics in therapy, and it's very effective for people, and it really works so much faster and better than anything else, right? I've seen it, and I know people that did it. They did like trauma therapy, like but because they've actually seen that when they do MRIs and other imaging of people who've had significant trauma, it literally rewires their brain. And then that's why they then have all these problems. They had like a traumatic thing. And if we could just undo that, like, wouldn't that just, So it's like the fact that it was like, oh no, we can't undo the things that messed you up, right? So then, yeah, okay. It's very interesting. Like, it's very suspicious. Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. It's so...
I've been a facilitator for ayahuasca and other things like that for 7 or 8 years in South America now, and I have seen epilepsy. One person consumed ayahuasca and other plants that the indigenous said were helpful for that. Beginning from day one, after stopping his medication cold turkey, he never had another seizure. I have seen autistic people start looking you directly in the eyes, and their general symptoms just more or less vanish. Just all sorts of just completely insane things that science, basically medical science, would say is not possible. So
yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's a huge threat all across the board, I think, for the status quo in general.
Okay, and so then I guess overall, I guess because I kind of wanted to bring it back to the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
Um, so they seem to be a good channel for people to reach like a deeper feeling, whatever the deeper consciousness. What we described it, you described it beautifully earlier. And then you're saying other music does that as well. Like other musicians can do that as well, right? Like there's other
I've
music.
never seen it to the same degree, but you know, you can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know what it is, you can kind of sense it. Tool is a band that I think does that.
Mm.
Fish, anyone that's aware of it, I think is going to do this. And I actually had the opportunity to ask Danny Carey from Tool if he was aware of the Grateful Dead in LA a long time ago, because I was like, these guys must have tapped into that energy at some point, and he definitely was aware of it and did know. So that was helpful for me to to be able to confirm that there is a like for example in the Hermetic tradition, which has influenced the Grateful Dead a lot. There's this idea of lineage. Actually, in any shamanic tradition, there's lineage where the kind of the energy has to be passed on in some sense from one person to another. And it's kind of like that with this music. You know, once somebody is aware of the potential, then they're sort of able to transmit it themselves.
So you
You
think
know,
Dead and Company, for example, can do it, even if
John Mayer doesn't even know what it is.
okay, so John Mayer doesn't personally, but some of the
No.
other members still playing
Well,
maybe.
Weir knows for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
We're definitely. I mean, we're definitely 100%.
Okay.
And Mickey, and I'm sure they've tried to explain it to Mayer, but just my feeling from being there and whatnot is that he's a good musician, but I don't think he has really the depth yet to understand exactly what that is.
Right. I think there's a level of letting go of control in a way, letting the other
Yeah,
thing
he.
control. And I think he's very type A. He strikes
Mhm.
me as very type A, like just very like very good at what he does, doesn't want to make a mistake. Someone else said in the interview, they're like John Mayer he's made progress towards being better, but it was because at first he was so
Yeah.
afraid of making a mistake and stepping into the shoes, and now he's feeling a little more comfortable, and he's like letting himself like play around a little more and be a little more free. But I think he needs to get to like a third level of freedom where he has to tap in to the thing where you really let go, and that's that flow state I talked about that I've been in, and he has to get into the flow state, or else I see what you're saying. He's just performative. It's like I am the lead guitarist of a Grateful Dead cover band that has some original
Hmm.
members, but we're like, he's not in it yet. Okay, so I'll pay attention to that because I'm going to see them live. But I actually think Billy Strings, I heard Billy Strings and I've seen Fish live now twice. And so I think, like, you know, Trey Anastasio's band is doing the third night opener. And I actually think Billy Strings, their bluegrass is like really good. Like, they have it like I love when they just jam, and I love what they do. So again, maybe not at the level of what you experienced, obviously, because you were I mean a lightning bolt, and like I mean that stuff just sounds like it almost sounds like, come on, this can't be real. Like you made, you know, it just sounds like this was a story. But it's so crazy that that happened, and then that other people were like, you know, that just happened, you know, like whispered like, did that just happen? It's like that just happened. So okay, great. So probably for today, I have to wrap up because I have some things to do. But I'd love, you know, if we can always do another, like go deeper, or like go into like a subtopic and really dive in a future interview, because obviously you have so much knowledge, and it's so broad, and like so it's like pan, like this whole, like I can't even tap, like this would take hours to like unwind. So we have to decide, I guess, in the future, like we can have like a sub category. And but it's so cool that you do it's ayahuasca, right? Ayahuasca retreats. I've heard of that. So, and that makes sense. Peru, like that. This all is making a lot of sense now. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me, and you know what you said about the stories. I actually withhold a lot because it just gets so outrageous that I know people are just going to be rolling their eyes, so I just don't even bother. You know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can piece more together later, but I know what you're saying. I've had this coincidental, and then like people are like, "Oh, come on," like that. It's like, and unless you were there and you felt it, it's really hard to describe to someone later.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I really appreciate that you like contacted me and like were giving your time today. I really appreciate it. The channel has been People seem to really like it, and they really liked the first interview I did. So I just think having the more, I think everybody adds such beautiful color, because I believe we're all part of some beautiful rainbow, and that everybody is like a different color in that spectrum, and we really need everybody to fill it up. Like, I think the more we have, it becomes a more beautiful tapestry, because everyone is so unique and like just add, but we're all together, right? It takes everybody to make the tapestry. So that's kind of how I view the world. Like, everybody has something to give, and everyone has a story to tell, and I just think it's good to like have this documented, because one day this is like going to be historical record, and like
Yeah.
kids 200 years from now are going to find these videos and be like, oh, it's so old fashioned back then. But if we don't write it down or document it, then we don't pass it on, right? So I think it's important. And
Speaking of rainbows, since you mentioned it, Google Santa Cruz reunion double rainbow and look
uh-huh.
at what happened there.
Okay, I'm gonna look up double rainbow. I know the original double rainbow in the sky one, but this I'm gonna look up Santa Cruz reunion double rainbow, and I'm gonna
Yeah,
Google that. Okay, that'll be
yeah,
a
yeah.
fun episode. All right, well, thank you
Okay,
so much for joining me today, and let's stay in touch, and we can email, and I'm looking forward to future conversations.
yeah, yeah, likewise. Okay,
Okay,
goodbye.
thanks. Bye.